Welcome, everybody, to Learn Biz. This is the Small Business Podcast, trying to cover all things small business. Today, we're going to cover a topic that hits a lot of small businesses directly. It's a very vital topic. But the interesting thing is a lot of small businesses don't realize how crucial this is and kind of take it for granted. So we're going to be talking about hiring. And I don't think that small businesses are often aware of the significant impact that hiring has on their business. And now I've said this a lot, and I'm gonna kick off with this statement, and that is that in a small business, if I'm a business of say a dozen people, and I hire someone, I have almost increased my workforce by 10% by hiring one person. Yeah. And if you look at a 10% change in your workforce, obviously that's going to impact how things are done. And so a lot of small businesses, they run on these lean crews, and they don't realize that by bringing someone in, they're constantly shifting their culture, they're constantly shifting what they're looking at and focusing on. And this isn't a bad thing, but it is definitely something to be aware of. And so today we're going to be talking about what to be looking for. And I really don't want to get into, this is not how to conduct an interview. This is not hey, this is how to hire. This is understanding what labor is going to do to your business and how you should be looking at your workforce if you are an entrepreneur or if you are in any sort of management position that requires you to make hiring decisions.
So I want to start first with the sole entrepreneur growing. My work's becoming too much for me. I need a hire.
Okay.
Right? Because that one, they stress so much over that, right?
That first hire is a big deal.
Yes. But I think you could mitigate some of that stuff when you realize that, look, you can't, at some point in time, you have to duplicate yourself if you want to grow the company.
Yes.
And so that's the purpose of the hiring, is to duplicate yourself or certain tasks that you can do that someone else can do that doesn't require potentially the same skill set that you need as an entrepreneur.
Now, there's so much that I want to talk about here, but I'm going to interject with something real quick to just kind of put it out there. There are a lot of self-employed individuals, and then there are business owners.
Right.
And on paper, self-employed and business owner basically look the same. But the difference between self-employed, and this is my definition, but I'll tell you what, it holds water, right? So I'm gonna pick on like a doctor's office, or a dentist, or someone that is in kind of a profession where you have a strict standard that you have to meet. And basically the way that you run your business is that, you've got to keep accurate records and file your taxes and things like that. But for the most part, you're really not making the same kind of business decisions as someone who is maybe going out and doing freelance work, or I'm trying to think of other solo entrepreneur type.
Bidding jobs.
Yeah. And so, like as a doctor, you're not out bidding. You don't have to go and bid out jobs. You have people that are coming to you. They have an expectation of what the service is going to be. Right. Insurance is regulating most of what's happening. You don't have an assembly
line.
Yeah. And so a lot of times this is self-employment. You are self-employed. And it's great. I actually think that self-employment is an excellent path for a lot of people. The way that I'm going to talk a lot about decision-making here is focused more on the business owner, the one that has a little bit more autonomy or chooses to take more autonomy. Because just because you're a doctor and have a doctor's office doesn't mean that you're not wanting to be more innovative. I've seen a lot of doctors that have been innovative,
right?
But I've also seen doctors that are just like, look, I show up, I do my job, and we bill according to insurance, and that's the end of it, right? So that was my interjection. I apologize. Did I already just get offensive?
No. I just didn't know where you're going to go with it.
Oh.
So. Yeah. Right. So, but hiring that first one, so I want to address that one for just a minute. Hiring that first one, when you realize you can't keep up with the workload and you have to do something to duplicate what you're doing to do it, First thing I always counsel everyone is go sit down with your local employment office and understand the taxes, the reports, the filings. They have free individuals that will walk you through that one, help you understand it, so that you're not trying to figure it out on your own. Because online you can learn a lot, but it's also nice when you sit down with someone else that can say, all right, yes, here's the things you're going to worry about, and here's when the hiring, these are the dates you need to do. An accountant, but a lot of small, entrepreneurs, sole proprietor type stuff. I know a lot of them that still do their own accounting. Mm-hmm. When you start to hire an employee, I'm telling you, you better get an accountant.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be an expensive one, just enough to help you understand.
Clarify, you can get a bookkeeper here.
Right. So okay. I would buy off on that.
Which they are accountants, but there's kind of this idea of, here's an accountant, here's a bookkeeper in terms of
one has gone through a little bit more school and is certified. They both understand bookkeeping and accounting. Mm-hmm. One has just done additional accounting years and tests, and generally it helps them with corporate law, corporate accounting. I shouldn't say law, accounting.
So a couple things that you hit on that I'm just gonna talk on and give my take on this. So if I'm going to determine whether I want to use a software or whether I want to use a bookkeeper, personally, I've seen more success with entrepreneurs using bookkeepers and only contracting out a couple hours a week with them.
Right.
So, yeah, you're probably going to pay a little bit more for that bookkeeper than you are if you're going to use some sort of software program.
But on the back end of the year, when you go to file your taxes and it's clean and it's fast and efficient, and what you pay in a bookkeeper occasionally through the year saves you what you're going to pay the accountant at the end of the year. Accountants are a lot more expensive. A CPA is a lot more expensive than a bookkeeper.
Yeah. Or what you're pulling from your own time. So
right.
If you as a business owner, you're spending those couple of hours when a bookkeeper could be spending those couple of hours, and you could be paying them, I don't know, I've seen bookkeeping anywhere from $15 an hour up to about $40 an hour, depending on the area and their expertise. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, somewhere between $15 to $40 an hour, you're using 1 to 2 hours a pay period to just get the payroll run. That frees up your time.
That's right.
And it frees up your mental energy. And that's a big one that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand.
That's correct. Am I doing it right? Am I going to have problems? Is it going to come back to bite me? Versus, I know have someone else who's my second set of eyes to make sure it's done right.
Yeah.
Good point.
And so now I want to talk about something that you hit on, and I'm going to take it back a step, and then I'm going to make it a segue into something that I think is really, really critical. So you talked about hiring that first person. Now, by the way, I want to reiterate, you mentioned this, but I think it's worth reiterating, and that is this is an excellent time to get some counsel from like a small business office, a lot of universities,
right.
A lot of economic development offices.
There's SCORE, SBDC, women's business centers.
Like they can counsel you, and that's if you're hiring your first employee, get some counsel. Like just get some counsel, right? But this is where I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to say I honestly would see how far you could get on contracting and freelancing some of those services, because there are two sides to employment that I see a lot of entrepreneurs deal with. And honestly, we're talking about your first employee, but this starts to branch into all small businesses, because I look at things and I say, okay, we just talked about outsourcing your bookkeeping. What about outsourcing some of your marketing? What about outsourcing your CFO function? What about outsourcing some of your logistics management? I mean, there's a lot that you can outsource. And unless you're running that as a critical part of your business, outsourcing and learning how to manage contracts, one, it can be a lot cheaper. But the other thing that I'm looking at is it lets you test the waters before committing to hiring someone.
Right.
I've seen businesses that they say to themselves, okay, I need someone to do my marketing. And so they go ahead and they hire someone to do their marketing. And then with someone on payroll, they're trying to figure out what they actually need. Mm-hmm. And so it creates this expensive learning curve. And, there's a learning curve. If you've never done this in your business before, there's a learning curve. But if you can contract with someone and say, okay, I want you to do 5 to 10 hours a week of marketing services for me. And then you can start to see, okay, what's working, what's not working, what kind of things do we want to invest our money in? Oh, I forgot that on top of a salary or a payroll, I have to pay for all of the ad spend that I'm going to do.
Right.
Because I've seen that with marketing. People will say, okay, I've got a $40,000 marketing budget. So they're going to hire someone part-time and they're going to pay them $30,000 and they think, okay, we're good. And then they realize, oh, wait a second, I got to cover some payroll taxes and I got to get them some, computer and other things. And so that's going to gobble up the other 10,000. And then they have no budget to actually market.
Right.
And so they got someone working for them that they can't afford to do anything with. And so I say, look at what you can do to contract on the front end, but then use that as a stepping stone into more permanent, full-time relationships with employees in your company.
Okay. So now let's great counsel. Let's talk a little bit about that individual we're going to hire now. Okay. Because I have
the meat here.
Yeah. So when I look at them, I look at them, all right, do I need someone who is skilled, meaning they have to have a very specific set of knowledge or skill set, training, experience? Okay. Mm-hmm. So are they skilled? Do I need to have someone that's just moderately skilled, meaning they have to have a base and I can train them from there? Or can I get away with someone unskilled? Okay. So before I hire, I'm going to know that exactly. And then I'm going to go and say, okay, based off of some of those parameters, okay, what is the going market rate? Okay, not what can I afford, what is the going market rate? Okay, yeah. Because too many entrepreneurs say, well, this is what I'm willing to pay. Well, if you haven't compared that to the market, you may be paying more or you may not be able to attract good talent because you're not willing to pay a wage that's going to attract competent people. Even though they might have the skill set, you still may be getting dead wood.
Beware of hiring someone. So let's say that you're going to start at a professional salary. And there's some argument as to where professional salary is going to start. But I'm going to argue that professional salary starts at about $60,000 to $70,000 annual in the U.S. Obviously, if you're in an expensive area like San Francisco,
it's going to be higher.
It's going to be higher. But let's just say kind of a $60,000, $70,000 is sort of a range that you could look at for hiring professional. Just because you're hiring professional doesn't mean you're getting expertise.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of small businesses that what they'll do is they'll want someone who maybe is really good at, let's say, lean manufacturing. And so they want someone who can understand throughput and lean manufacturing and really can handle logistics and all these things. And they look at it, and I mean that type of person is probably going for what, 120? I'm guessing.
Could be.
And they're looking at it and saying, well, I was going to pay 70, and so they should be up at 120. To your point, but they're like, well, 70 is a professional wage, and so they end up getting someone with a degree, and that person has a degree in, like music, and I mean, I love music. I'm not trying to bash on a degree in music. I'm just saying, but you get someone who has a degree in music.
It's unrelated.
Yeah, and they don't understand lean manufacturing and theory of constraints and throughput, and so now I've got a professional, but I don't have the right professional.
Right.
And I'm stuck. So,
and this comes back to my argument, and we've had conversations about this, that I always talk about dogs being paper purebreds, right? Okay, they're papered. And if you don't have the right papered dog, you don't come to the dog show. Doesn't matter how obedient the dog is, doesn't matter how good looking the dog is. If it's not papered, it doesn't come to the dog show. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, in a lot of industries, especially at the professional level, if you're not papered, okay, you don't have the right degrees, the right degrees, the right certificates, sometimes from the right school, right? Okay. you don't get the interview, right? You don't get to come to the dance.
Yeah.
But as an owner, that's also good to know, to realize that what qualifications, and I use the term papered loosely, but I like the example of it. What does that paper say about me? And does it mean I have the right qualifications to get the interview or come to the, to the show?
So I'm going to run with this. I know this is dangerous territory. Disclaimer: do not be offended. We are not calling anyone a dog out there.
That's right.
So, but I am going to run with this for a second. And it's funny, in the dog world, how many people argue purebred versus mutt. And I know people that all day long will say, get a mutt. They're so much better. You don't have the problems of the purebred. And then the argument for the purebred is what you're getting. A mutt is a wild card. I've seen mutts that are super obedient, easy to train, very lovable, and I've seen mutts that are terrible. But I've seen purebreds that are just terrible. Point number one that I want to make is that it has more to do with the owner than it does.
That's absolutely right. And that's one of the points I was going to bring up about the owner, and because I'm the first one to admit with people that work around me, especially when I start as a project and I kind of get put in that project management role. My first thing to say is, look, I am not easy to work with, because I can't always get my vision out of my head onto paper or concisely enough for you to understand what I'm wanting to do. And that frustrates people, because I tell them a lot of times, hey, you may have to go through 5 drafts before you even get close to what I'm thinking. I'll do my best, but don't take offense when I say I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because I already get that I am hard to work for because of that component, right?
Well, and think about this. So bringing it back to those purebred situations. So let's assume that I recognize, and I'm going to stick with my lean manufacturing throughput. Yeah. So I recognize that I've got a warehouse, that I've got production, that I've got logistics that are all running in and out of this warehouse, and I need someone who can understand this. And so I'm going to hire the right person. I'm going to get the right breed.
Yeah.
But if you get a purebred dog, especially a high-end purebred dog,
right.
So I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on this dog, and then I fail to train the dog, or
didn't matter.
I don't give them the right food, the right grooming. Like purebred dogs, they're not just expensive on the front end; they're expensive throughout their life.
That's right.
But again, to your point, if you want to go to the dog show, you have to have the purebred dog. And so if I'm going to hire someone, I'll be like, okay, I understand that I need $120,000 to attract the right talent. But then do I also understand that when they want to make changes in the warehouse, I better have another $100,000 to reorganize my line,
to update the software, to whatever it may be.
And so this might be a $400,000 investment,
right,
for me to really get competitive where I need to be. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, thank goodness I don't have to do manufacturing or warehousing or anything complicated like that. I'm like, I don't care. Look at accounting. Every business does some form of accounting.
Right.
And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, so you're going to hire an accountant. Well, what level of accountancy do you need? Do you need someone who is an $80,000? They've got a master's of accountancy, maybe not quite a CPA, and you could attract them for $80,000, maybe $90,000. Or do you need someone that's going to have 10 years of experience, and they really are going to do some serious tax mitigation and international transactions with you? And if you don't have the back end to support that purebred,
right,
why are you getting it? You know?
Yeah, that's right. And a good basis as you're going through this process is you have Indeed, Monster. There's several out there that are just job forums where you can see and hire people. But if you want to feel for what it really is, if you're not sure, spend some time doing that. Your local job service or workforce services, every state calls it something slightly different. To get a feel for what it's going to be like, keywords you want to use as you're looking to attract the right person. because that helps weed a lot of those applications out when you get the right wording in it.
Yeah.
To do that one. But it is important to get the paper piece of it right as you're going through that hiring process, because it just makes it easier now that when you go to start to do the interviewing, who you want to interview.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where I get really offensive.
Oh, no.
Let's talk mutts. Everyone's like, I'm okay if you want to compare me to a purebred. I'm like, now I'm comparing you to a mutt.
I'm the mutt, the one the family just loves, and I just want my ears scratched. Don't ask me to do anything else, right?
The point that I want to make here is to say, don't pass up a good
I
mutt.
agree.
Just because it's labeled as a mutt, some of the best dogs I have ever seen are mutts.
Well, and here's when you get into some government entities, interviews are overly structured, stupidly structured, meaning I have to ask the same questions to the same person, even though their resumes are different and I need to know different things about them. I'm only allowed. In the private industry, the best thing I can tell you, and you understand this one because you're in around this one, you're interacting in this way in some capacities all the time. And that is, if you want to understand someone and their skill sets, their talents, and their abilities, if there's a question mark on their resume, their paper,
sure,
have a conversation.
Yeah.
Don't a light conversation over a lunch, right? On the golf course. There's a ton of places to have conversations with people to really understand them and what their skill sets are, because you'll learn more about them from having a conversation than having a formal interview.
Well, and what's interesting is I always want to know when I'm having that conversation, what direction is this person going? Because they might be heading in the direction that you want, and it might be a better investment for you to get they got to learn the ropes anyway. And so maybe let them cut their teeth on figuring out your business and understanding your business while they're getting quote unquote papered. Some of the best hires I've ever seen are people that they come in with a pretty crappy resume, but they've got the right direction for whatever reason in life.
Well, and that's an interesting point because, and I'm going to chase this squirrel, so don't lose your thought.
Sure.
And that is that I'm amazed at the number of people who do not know how to put together a resume.
Okay.
To that point. So when you say crappy resume, it's not necessarily lacking of skill or experience. It's just that they just got bad advice, or they didn't have anyone review their resume or anything like that. So they just put something out there that they thought was good. Because think about it. How many people go through high school and some college and never have a resume class?
Yeah.
The vast majority.
Or, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be a jerk here for a second, they get a resume class from whom? Some teacher who has not actually gone out in the workforce for the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. Ever applied for a job.
And I'm not trying to bash public education. I actually think that most teachers are angels, because for the crappy wage that they get and
bless their hearts
and what they have to put up with, I'm like, you are going straight to heaven, because I was not willing to do that. And so I actually love teachers, but a lot of times they're not the ones that can advise business. And so, I've seen bad advice on resumes happen a lot.
Yeah. So don't assume because you see a resume, and some people, there's templates and they're just plugging stuff into a template. I've literally seen resumes where it says insert something here, and they left the insert something in their resume. Well, and you're just like, why didn't you proofread and take it out? And it makes me chuckle enough, but there's enough in there that sometimes I'm like, I'm intrigued enough that I want to at least have a conversation with them, even though they left insert your talents or your hobbies here.
Well, and AI is starting to write resumes, and you're going to see more and more of that.
That's true.
And so you'll get people that don't realize that even though AI did a really clean job, they didn't do a great job. Like AI is good at making a clean resume, but maybe not showcasing or targeting the job you're going after.
Well, that's right.
Okay. you told me not to lose my thought. I didn't lose my thought. So I'm going to jump back before we start talking about resumes and whatnot. But this is the idea of there are a lot of people that for whatever reason, their stage of life has not allowed them to get on paper what they need to have. A common thing is you'll see someone who started a family. They had a couple kids and they just put their priority on some kids. And so on paper, they don't look great. They look like they haven't done much. And I'm like, well, no, they just focused on raising a family for a period of time. Or you have some people that maybe they had a medical situation that caused them to have to, drop out of school, a family crisis that caused them to have to drop out of school. And so they might not have all of the paper that you're looking for, but these can be great hires. These can be people that if they're moving in the right direction, then by all means hire them, help them finish off that degree or that certificate or whatever. But keep this in mind too. If you're going to hire someone on the cheap, like I'm only going to pay you let's say $50,000 because, well, you don't have the papers I'm looking for. When they get those papers, if you don't bump them up to that 60, 70,
they're gone.
And so just be aware of that. It's not a bad thing. We've talked many times on this podcast about the importance of training people, even if they're looking to go somewhere else.
Right.
You come out ahead almost every single time by training them instead of just putting them out cold and leaving them to die. And, those are my thoughts on purebreds and mutts. And I don't know. That wasn't offensive, was it? I don't know when I'm offensive. Do you, like that?
I just like the analogy because it helps us understand hiring that some people are going to look really good on paper, even though they're probably not going to be that great. Some other people, the resume might not be that great, even though we can see little inklings that there's some possibility there. Mm-hmm. Because almost everyone that you go through a hiring process, generally there's a resume of some kind, right? And if there's not, then I'm going to say, because there are times that you just meet someone on the street and, hey, that's interesting. They might be a good fit for the company. Learning how to have a conversation, mm-hmm. right, about their philosophies on business, good questions about their experience versus tell me your strengths and your weaknesses,
Yeah.
Those are great, but everyone, that's a canned question and you just always get canned answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's better ways to do that in hiring. But spending some time around them, I hear people that when they do interviews, it's not, between a desk and over a desk. It's, hey, no, we walk around my business
and look at things and tell me, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get perspective. And so they're seeing the business as well, but also I get to see reactions and sometimes just comments about, they may make it about employee or someone working or whatever else. You also learn about their temperament because that's important as well. So interviews where if you have the type of facility where maybe you can walk around as you're having that interview and have discussions, stop in a hallway as you're having some discussion and walk in while you're sitting around another component or a piece of equipment and having another part of the discussion as they're watching what's going on. Great. I love that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really good. Really good. I'm going to throw a closing thought out here, and you're going to be mad at me because you're like, what do you mean closing thought? This is a whole episode in and of itself, and you're trying to tie it up in 2 minutes. Yes, that's what I'm just about to do.
All right.
Your interviewing, your hiring always needs to be tied to your financials. And when you tie it to your financials, you need to know how that person is going to bring in more profit than they're costing the company. Every hire should be profitable. And that's not a guess, that is a calculation. If you don't know how to do that, I am going to put a little shameless plug in here. Growth by the Numbers, our training program on jazzjune.com. It's jazzjune.com/GBTN. We will teach you how to do that calculation. But Most people are going to hire based on pain points.
Right.
And that is not, that should never be your first step. Your first step should be hiring based on profitability. And then if you can eliminate some pain points at the same time, that's a bonus. But the problem is I look at it and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed. If I hire someone, I won't be busy No, you will. You'll still be busy, overwhelmed, and stressed.
That's right. Because you'll take on different responsibilities or focus on things you haven't been able to focus on.
Yeah. And so if you bring someone on to take away your stress and they're not profitable, guess what? Your stress just augmented.
That's right.
Because now you're paying for this. And where's your stress coming from? Oh, payroll. I can't make payroll all of a sudden because I've overstretched myself on labor because I never tied it to the financials. I never looked at the profitability of each and every person. Everyone tries to tie sales. They're like, okay, if I'm going to hire a salesperson, they need to make this much money. I'll put them on commission, and everyone tries to tie that in. But I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, I literally want you to, and I'm not even exaggerating here, if you're going to hire a cleaning crew to come in and clean the bathrooms and empty garbages, tie that to profitability. Like, what do you mean tie that to profitability? They're the cleaning crew. It's a requirement. I'm like, well, do you want them to come once a week or do you want them to come every other week? What's the difference between morale and cleanliness? And do you actually understand the role of every person, the driver, the person who's just hot-shotting your product? And you look at that person and you say, okay, what's their contribution to the profit line of the company? And yeah, so anyway, don't look at pain points. That is not where you start. You start at the profit line. You understand what that person needs to bring in or what capacity you have in your profitability to create the culture that you want. Then you can start looking at alleviating pain points. But you can suck it up and deal with some pain points. Every business has them.
Well, and I don't think you ignore the pain points, but use data behind the pain point because otherwise the pain point doesn't go away.
True.
And that's the whole goal, is to minimize those bottlenecks through hiring the appropriate labor and assigning the correct tasks.
Yeah. And those tasks, they can be very indirect or seemingly unrelated.
Right.
But if everyone's really frustrated with how clean the bathrooms are, and they're like, the bathrooms are disgusting, and you find out that your sales guy is cleaning the bathrooms because he can't stand how dirty they get, and you're looking at that and saying, well, okay, I'm technically paying this person, they're making $100,000 a year to clean bathrooms. I could probably contract this out for a fifth of that rate.
Right. Yeah. You think about the hour that he spends every 2 weeks kind of cleaning it up at his wage, do the math.
Yeah. And so that's what I mean by link it to the profits is I'm saying find out what the impact is. And so
good.
There we go. I'm going to wrap up with that.
Yeah. And I don't have any closing remarks. I think you've done a good job in closing it up. There's a lot to hiring. Before if you're versed in hiring, then fine tune that. That's what we talk about when we talk about growth of a company. Is little changes can a lot of times have significant impact. So in hiring, never assume that what you're doing hiring wise is perfect and it works. Always say, all right, is there something we could be improving? Is there a way we could have better interviews? Is there a way that we can look to acquire, the best talent, etc. And, if it's the first time you're doing something, then always get some counsel doing that.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks everybody for joining us today on Learn Biz. I'm always messing up the Jazz June Learn Biz stuff, and you know that. So I'm not even going to tell you where to go. I'm going to just say, Ryan, this is your piece.
go to jazzjune.com/learnbiz.
Oh.
I know that was so for Ethan's benefit. jazzjune.com.
That's why I don't get hired to run the social media.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.